Hi.
How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well.
Doing well?
I'm doing well.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was a good day at work today.
Yeah?
Yep.
Oh.
They hired somebody to help me.
Oh, they did finally?
Yep, they did while I was gone.
Okay.
The person I asked for. So
And the person you asked for yet?
Yep. Yeah, so I'm very excited. It's a good day.
Oh.
How's your day?
What's that?
How's your day?
Well, I got a text this morning saying that the one that I work with, the kids were pukey, so I had to go in early. So on Tuesday after a long weekend, those are always fun. But all in all, actually, it wasn't a bad day, actually. It turned out not too bad, so...
Yeah. Did your day fly?
A little, I guess it did. Kinda.
Yeah, like mine did. Like it's like, oh, we're doing the podcast now. It's like, How did that happen so fast?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, explain what we're doing today, Todd.
Well, we did the verses with you and I last time with me.
Yep.
So this time I was going to do it with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what it is I'm going to ask you some questions.
All right.
I'm going to give you two options, and you're going to tell me what option you prefer, and why.
Awesome. So just to be clear, we've lifted this game from the Bunny Ears podcast, so we'll give them props on the invention of the game.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. But I love that podcast. I can't heap enough praise on it. It is very entertaining.
Yeah?
Yep.
Cool.
Yep, definitely. Oh, just real quick.
Yeah.
Before we start the game, I do want to announce that the podcast, I've made it available on a few more services. It's available on TuneIn and Streaker. And, sorry, not Streaker, Stitcher. My mistake. It's available on Stitcher now as well.
Okay.
If some people are having trouble finding the podcast on, like, they can't see it in their podcast player because not everybody uses iTunes.
Right.
Or Shoutcast or whatever the hell the iTunes one is called. If you can't find my podcast, email me, message me, get a hold of me, let me know, hey, it's not available on here. I will continue to strive to have the podcast available in as many locations as possible. You shouldn't have to download a different podcast player just to listen to Sean Geek. Just let me know. If I'm missing any, please let me know and I will spread the word.
Sweet.
Okay, that's it. That's all I got for ads.
Okay. Okay, are you ready for the questions?
I'm ready for the questions.
Okay, first question. Marvel versus DC.
Oh. I'm going to answer, so instead of having it be a straight versus, as in which one do I like more than the other, I'm actually going to flip this a little bit and say, not in terms of quality, but in terms of which set of heroes would...
The characters, yeah.
Yeah, which set of characters would defeat the other set of characters. So
defeat.
Yeah, so in a straight... if Superman was beating on Thor, like Superman from DC was beating on Thor from Marvel, I will give DC the win.
We could do a whole episode of one versus the other from each comic.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, DC, their heroes are less grounded and way more powerful in general than the Marvel heroes. Oh. So I will give it to the DC heroes. Personal favorite, I prefer Marvel because they're not that powerful, but yeah.
More variety or more popular characters, maybe? No?
the characters in Marvel are more popular than DC, but DC has, like, overall, like, per capita, if you want to look at it that way. But DC definitely, between Superman and Batman, they win the popularity race. But sales figures go with Marvel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Second question.
Yes.
Okay. Also referring to comics, the way that old comics were written versus the way the new comics are written. Because I'm sure the authors or the people who wrote them, I don't know if it's a rotating these different people or it's always the same writers. So I guess it would be the writers from yesteryear versus the writers of today.
Oh boy.
But you would have to, and I'm sure you have a lot of experience with the older stuff and the newer stuff, so you should be able to.
I certainly do. Oh man. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, we might be able to explain. It might take a while to explain this one.
Yeah, I think so. Well, okay. Well, obviously, the writers of yesteryear. I mean, that's the stuff I grew up on. I learned how to script comics based on how they were done back in the old days. Back when I started, anyway. I mean, Stan Lee. All the original guys. Len Wein. Marv Wolfman. God, all those guys are like, I mean, I wouldn't be into comics if it wasn't for them. But that being said, the intricacy with some of the writers in this generation, Kurt Busiek, J. Michael Straczynski, like those two guys are my two favorite writers of all time, like easily my two favorite writers of all time. And they're kind of they're older guys that got into comics a little bit later, I think, but they're solid. They're so solid, and they're intricate, and they're not just saying the same stories over and over again, rehashing. They're really creative in how they approach legacy characters that have been around for 70 years. They can still make a character interesting. Right. And there's no two writers on the planet that work that well other than those two guys. Those are easily my two top favorite new guys. And it's to the point that I try to read anything that these two writers put out. In the old days, I wouldn't follow a writer as much. I would follow the company. So I think the new writers have the edge by a small margin.
Right. They've kind of honed the whole thing. Like, it's not like originally it was all the meat and potatoes. Now they've kind of streamlined it. No, or there's more to the story. There's more backstory. Or there's more of something.
The only issue I have is with the style of how comics are written nowadays. Other than those two gentlemen, a lot of the new crop of writers are on a title for a very short amount of time, and then they move on to another title. So, in terms of quality of writing overall, the quality of writing overall is way, way under what it used to be, with those two writers being the exception. A writer will be on an issue for 6 months, and then he's gone. Like he'll move on to something else. There's very few writers. And it might be the industry, because they might put a writer on a title, and because it doesn't turn numbers over within like 3 months to their liking, they'll pull a writer off before he's had a chance to tell his story. And then by doing that, you've started character arc that's 3 issues long or 6 issues on, and then you're onto another character arc. And they end storylines too quickly because, just the whole way the industry works, it doesn't favor long-term writers. Right. Unless you're established.
Well, that kind of sucks, yeah.
like for example, like when I wrote my Simca comic, right? That was plotted out as a 3-year arc. So 36 issues. If I'd have been cut off at 12 issues, it would have been shitty. But the story just built and built and built and built, so that when you get to the end, it's like the payoff is so worth it. But if I'd have done that in 12 issues, the payoff would have been, that's pretty good. But because I had 3 years to tell the story, and no one, said, well, you got to cram this into 12 issues, I was able to have, a multifaceted story with all these layers and all these character arcs, like, so much better.
Right.
But I couldn't have done it in 12 issues. It would have sucked.
Huh. Well, it's interesting.
How you like them apples?
Yeah, that's pretty good. Now I have a question for you.
Yep.
Okay, and this is kind of related to comics, because and the only reason I'm asking is because I've seen this on TV, and it, like, years ago, soap operas. Soap operas, like
yep.
All the ones that
Days of Our Lives, Another World.
Yeah, all those ones. Yeah.
General Hospital.
Okay. Yeah. So I had the TV on the other day, and I think we had a day off, or it was something. It was a holiday, and of course, soap operas are on in the afternoon, right? And I've never noticed this before, but all of a sudden you see these people talking on their cell phones, and then now they're reading their cell phones and they're reading it to the audience, right? And I'm thinking, back in the day, they never had this extra thing that they did with the cell phones. They've had to integrate it, in the whole thing. Now, in comics, have they taken the characters and the superheroes and put them in a certain world, and that's kind of like the box that they're in and they stayed in?
No.
Or have they evolved into today's world with all the newer technology and such?
So the way they've done it, and there's a few articles about this that maybe I could find one to link in the podcast here, but they have an altered timeline. So in the comics, what may take 10 years to tell in our time, in real time, might have only happened over 2 or 3 months in the comic books. Mm-hmm. So the time progression works that way. Now, in terms of, they don't really reference years, or they try to avoid referencing years. So even though the story is obviously in the modern day, it's not necessarily taking place in 2018. Maybe it's taking place in 2020, because by the time we're in 2020, that was, 3 months of real time, but it was, 20 years of time in comics that took place. So the technology side of it is one of those that's kind of really weird, because you'll get Spider-Man using a payphone or a landline, and now, like, Spider-Man uses cell phones all the time. He shoves it into his utility belt, or not utility belt, but you know what I mean? Right. Or things like that. Like, so the advance of technology from when Spider-Man started, for example, to now, considering in comic terms, it's just months that have gone by. So, for example, Spider-Man is only considered to be like 35 years old in the comics. Right. But he was obviously, he was created in 1962 or 63. So but he started out using telephones, old school rotary dial telephones, and he's using a cell phone now. So I don't know how they explain the advance of science, but I think the idea is everything started, maybe 10 years ago in a Marvel timeline, 10 or 15 years ago in a Marvel timeline, and Spider-Man has only aged like 15 or 20 years in that time, but it's really been 60 years. But the technology, so I get that. I don't know if I'm explaining this properly. So in essence, if it's the year 2020, now in comics, it's actually 2018, but say it's 2020 in comics, the universe only started in 85 or 88. So it has only progressed 20 years, but the technology started really archaic 20 years ago within the pages of the comic. But there was a quick evolution a quicker evolution in technology within the comic. Shorter turnaround time.
Now, does J. Jonah Jameson still in the Spider-Man comics?
Yes.
Now, does he have a smartphone, a flip phone, an archaic Motorola cell phone, or just a regular phone?
He has a cell phone. He has like a modern cell phone, yeah.
Okay, now, does Superman still change in the non-existent telephone booth?
No, he does not.
No.
They've actually evolved where he changes. He can do it so fast that nobody can see him changing anyway, so he doesn't do it in a phone booth.
Okay, it's not like the movies. I mean, the movies is a whole case. It's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
With all these different heroes, and they all have their own things. But in the comic world, it was always like, this is how they changed. This is what they did. But now, as time has gone on, has that changed?
Yeah. Well, one thing they do, and it's almost like every 10 years or so, they kind of rewrite the comics. It's called retconning.
Mm-hmm.
So what they'll do is they'll take everything that happened before and kind of retell it again. So they might revise the origin a little bit and modernize it somewhat.
Right.
And just kind of wipe out certain things that have happened because they don't make modern sense anymore. And kind of so it's called retconning. So
they're just updating?
Yeah, so for example, when Spidey was in high school, Spidey had a cell phone in high school. When he was in high school.
Okay.
So they might retcon exactly the science of how he became Spider-Man just a little bit, because at the time they invented science. They invented a science to how he'd become Spider-Man, but now it's like, well, you know what? It's a little bit different now. There's actually technology out there that could help him become Spider-Man that makes more sense than what originally was stated. I don't know if Spider-Man's the best example, but they'll kind of retcon how
kind of like the backstory almost.
Yeah, like
there's more detail.
Yeah. So they might go back like 10 more years in history on the character, for example, because originally the origin was like Batman. His parents were killed, and then when he was 16 or 18, he dedicated himself to avenging his parents. They're avenging their death.
So like a prequel.
Well, that was the story back in the day. But then they filled in his time from when his parents were killed to when he started training and how he got the training. Because originally he just trained in every martial arts, but then, like in the movies, they retconned it to say, well, Batman actually trained under the League of Shadows, and that's how he got all the training. He didn't just, go to dojos and learn every single martial art or read books, or he learned the martial arts in a different way.
Now you're talking about the comics?
Yep.
The
movies retconned it to make it make more modern sense, but the comics have also done it maybe in slightly different ways.
How many Batman movies are there?
Too many.
So like, wow, he was trained by this guy with this movie and this guy another movie.
Well, there was like the original.
Everything changed.
There was like 3 or 4 with started with Michael Keaton, and then there was 3 other ones that came after that Christopher Nolan did, and then they reinvented Batman again and Batman v Superman.
Okay, so who does Batman belong to? Marvel or DC?
DC.
Okay. Now, for every time that they want to, say a producer wants to do a movie, so what do they do? Just go to DC, we want to do another Batman movie again. So here's X amount of dollars. This is what we want to do. You guys don't have to look over the script or anything, or like how does that work? Do they have to kind of go into it and approve it?
Well,
or do they just say, just give us the money, you do whatever you want?
No, well, the way it works is Warner Brothers owns DC Comics.
Okay.
So only they can make DC movies.
So Warner Brothers is the only one that's making the Batman movies.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, they can't. If someone else is going to do it, they have to do it through Warner Brothers. So Warner Brothers gets to vet if a little indie, like a smaller studio is going to do it. But basically, it's a Warner Brothers distribution. Warner Brothers calls the shots. It calls the shots to the point that the comic side of it. The comic side of it doesn't actually have any creative control, or has less creative control over the movie than you'd think. So the studio may say, Warner Brothers as a studio may say, we really like those Batman movies Christopher Nolan did. They were nice and dark. So every DC movie that's going to come out has to be nice and dark. The DC Comics are like, well, we don't think that's the way you should go, because that's not how DC Comics is. It's actually very light, and it's more light and fluffy than like Marvel is.
Right.
You know, it's more fantastic. It's less grim and gritty. But because Warner Brothers had so much success with a gritty Batman, everything else has to be gritty now. While Marvel Studios has even though they're owned by Disney, they're giving carte blanche on how they're going to make their movies, and Marvel owns the rights to their characters. Even though Disney has the rights to Marvel's characters, they're letting the Marvel Studios company, which is the movie side of Marvel, have 100% control over their characters.
Yeah, I guess they wouldn't, don't change something that works. If it's working, don't screw it.
Yeah,
don't have Mickey Mouse pop in, on a surprise episode, on a guest appearance.
Yeah.
Just do what you do best, and that's, and everyone will be happy.
But Disney does have a lot of rules that Marvel has to follow. So public image of their heroes. So any of the actor that plays a hero in a Marvel movie has to have an impeccable public facade.
Right.
So they can't go out, getting hammered in public. They can't make particular comments. They always have to remain in shape. So if they're going to be seen out in public, they have to maintain that look of the superhero. Because if a fan runs into Chris Evans, who plays Captain America, Chris Evans needs to look like Captain America. He can't, have a big paunch, and be out of shape. And so Disney actually imposes those rules upon their actors. Which is why James Gunn got fired, because they found some old stuff and say, hey, this doesn't match with, the good guy image that DC has, so you're out of here.
Right.
But having said that, Warner Brothers one of the guys from Warner Brothers has moved over to one of the guys from DC Comics has moved over to Warner Brothers to be the person in charge of the DC movies. So they've actually got a figurehead from the comic side of things to help the movies out, because Warner Brothers has recognized that they've screwed up their movies and they're not as profitable as they could be, that there's some sort of disconnect with the audience, that maybe that their vision is not the right vision, and maybe they should trust someone from the comic side.
Right.
So that's a good step forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. You ready for the next question?
Yep.
You have time?
Yeah, I got about 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Comic-Con versus KeyCon.
KeyCon, hands down.
Okay, but why?
Why?
What are the differences between both, and what do you like and dislike between both?
Comic-Con, and it could be San Diego Comic-Con or it could be the Winnipeg Comic-Con. Comic-Cons are media cons. They're not comic book conventions. I know they're called a comic book convention, but
that's what I thought they were.
Yeah, but they're not at all. It's all about movies and TV shows. Now, yes, superhero stuff has made the jump to the big screen and the small screen, but Comic-Con used to be about all the writers and the artists and the editors and the publishers, and it's not about that. They do have a presence there, but it's overshadowed by the Hollywood side of things. So, and you pay for everything. I think you pay to wait in line. You pay to get an autograph. You pay to speak to somebody. You pay to get a selfie taken. You pay you pay to go into a conference room and listen to somebody talk. You pay for this. You pay for that. KeyCon is a social convention, in that it's a convention to meet the creators of things, as opposed to the actors that represent what was created.
Right.
So it's more the writers or the illustrators, or in some cases it's the actors, but they have to be social people. There's rules to KeyCon that require that the guests they have some sort of interaction with the audience, that you basically pay an all-in price to go to the convention, so you can do anything at the convention that you want.
Right.
Versus, a Comic-Con where you pay an exorbitant amount to get in the front doors, and then you pay an exorbitant amount for anything that you want to do within. So KeyCon can cost me $60 for a weekend.
Right.
Comic-Con can cost me, a few $1,000s for the weekend.
Okay, I guess 600, but okay, a few thousand.
No, a few thousand.
From 60 to 600, but over 1,000.
I know someone that spent $3,000 at a convention in Edmonton.
Wow. Yeah, I've never been to the Comic-Con portion of it, and you and I have gone to the KeyCon one, and we've had podcasts regarding those, but I've never actually been to the Comic-Con one. When someone says Comic-Con, the first thing it comes to mind is the front of either a DC or Marvel comic, and whatever characters are there, people are dressing up as those characters, and then there's different booths for say where there would be different movies that were out at the time, and they would have either the producer or one of the actors or one of the writers or something to talk to regarding that. But from what I'm gathering, this is all either I don't know if it's promotional based and product based, like they're trying to push their wares type thing.
Yeah, they're yeah. Well, I think like Artist Alley at Comic-Con in Winnipeg, it does promote the artists and the writers, and you can go down that alley. The difference there, and I've done it many times. I've gone in, hey, there's one of my favorite artists or one of my favorite writers. I can actually go over there and talk to him or talk to her.
Right.
Now they are selling swag, and you can buy swag, but if you just want to talk to them, or you have stuff that you've already bought and you want them to sign, you can do that. But I think in that way, by having there not being really an associated cost with them being at the convention, they're actually pushing their brand more than anything. Hey, right. I'm the guy that writes Avengers comic books. I want people to buy Avengers comic books. If they get a chance to meet me and they like me and they see how nice I am, they might actually think about buying the comic book. So it actually helps push sales of comic books. While on the other side, I think it pushes people to go see movies, but it's not really, because people are already excited to go see the movie. Right. And they're only going there because they're, I don't know, it's a little different, but yeah, like KeyCon, if they could make Comic-Con in such a way that, okay, you know what, we know it's expensive, but if you could say, oh, look, I'm going to pay $1,200 for the weekend, for example, right. But that gives me access to everything. You know what? People would actually pay that price because they're already paying thousands of dollars, and then they're waiting in lines, and there's so much waiting in line. Like you'll spend 3 or 4 hours waiting in line, and you're missing like 10 other panels in the meantime. It's like it's not conducive. It's not a place where you can go and see a lot of stuff. You're going to see 3 or 4 things because it's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of expense. So you're either hindered by your budget or hindered by your time. Right. Like KeyCon, I literally could do, 15 or 16 panels over the weekend if I wanted to, one every hour, still do the social, and still have, time off to do other things.
And it still only costs you the price to get in. Yeah. Yeah. And then you don't even have to, and food. You go to any kiosk, they're going to charge you like ruthless amounts of money for crap.
Yep.
And these places, and with the KeyCon, it was like, this is homemade stuff people are making in their crock pots, bringing it in. They charge you $1. It's like, wow, you get a drink and food and you know. Yeah,
and they're just trying to cover their costs. All they're trying to do is cover their costs. Like, hey, you know, I was getting a room anyway.
Yeah.
And I've opened the room up, and it's costing me something to do the room. But then they have giveaways. They've got like 50-50 draws, and that's how they make their money back on the room. And you know, and then they're still making money on the food, but they're not making, you know, $10 a plate. On food. They're making, you know, 25 cents or 50 cents or whatever.
Just word of mouth. But someone's got chili down on the you know, room 4. I mean, okay, that's your advertisement right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But, you know, and then if people will vote for your room based on, oh, we really like that room, so if people vote for your room, KeyCon will actually pay them for running that room. Like, that's the prize you win.
Right. So basically they're two different animals altogether.
They're not even the same. Yeah, they're not even in the same realm. There aren't many social cons out there. It is a rare thing because they don't make as much money, I guess, maybe. I'm not really sure. But I prefer the ability to sit down and talk to somebody. Like, I was talking to Apollo from Battlestar Galactica, the original guy.
Oh, okay.
Richard Harris. I actually had a chat with him.
Wow.
He was there. And I just went over and I talked to him.
Okay, you talking KeyCon or
this was KeyCon. I just went over and talked to him. Actually, he talked to me. He pointed me out first because I guess I had my Chrome Dome. And then he came over and talked to me after, and we had a chat, like, you know, a few minute chat or whatever, but like, those are the kind of guests they get. If you're not a social guest and you're just going to do a panel and you don't want to interact with your audience, they don't want those people at a KeyCon type event.
Well, I've noticed that too, because the ones that were at the panels, like the key people that were coming, they were there throughout the whole thing. Like, you could, like, you'd be standing next to them, like they'd be, you know,
you're standing next to you waiting for chili.
What's that?
They'll be standing next to you waiting for chili.
And they're going, hey, there's good chili. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, like,
sit down and have a chat while you're eating. But it's a whole different ballgame. And I truly like the way KeyCon is run.
And you don't even have to be an Uber nerd either. That's the thing. Like, there's just lots to do. Like, you're not an Uber nerd at the level that I am.
No,
but you still have a great time.
Yeah, I mean, all the stuff like this Marvel DC. I don't know any of all this stuff. Like, all this in the new comic writing, the Marvel, the DC thing. I never really followed all that. I know the characters and who they are, but what brand they belong to and all the background stuff. That stuff I don't know. I know you know all that stuff.
Yeah, I do.
And it's that way, and this way. I mean, other people that are listening, they'll go, it might be stuff they didn't know, or I'm sure there's stuff they know that we don't know either. But it's nice to be able to to get that out there.
Hey, KeyCon, you just got a free plug. We'll wait for the check in the mail. Thank you very much. Oh, and while we're on the plugging for KeyCon, hey, if you want the Sean Geek podcast at KeyCon next year, why don't you drop me a line?
Where?
Where? I think there's a website called SeanMcGinnity.ca you can go to, and you can actually SeanMcGinnity.ca.
SeanMcGinnity.ca.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, go there, and then you can just drop me a line right on the website and say, hey, Sean Geek, could you come and do KeyCon for us this year? And I think we would probably say yes. Just putting it out there.
Yeah, just putting it out.
We have over 2,000 streams a month. We're global. We're everywhere. We have for some reason, a strong listenership in Sweden, Great Britain, Australia. That just came on board. We got some people in Australia, a bunch of Americans.
It blows my mind.
Yeah, so like people all over the place are listening to this thing. We're not a regional podcast, unlike some other ones. We're actually a global podcast. So, hey, if you want some representation at KeyCon from a global podcast, I'll do 2 or 3 panels or 4 panels all weekend. I'm sure Todd will join me too.
Yeah. What was the website again?
I think it's at SeanMcGinnity.ca.
Okay, good. So I want to make sure everyone got that.
That's right. You can also reach me on the Meet the Geeks Facebook page. It's at The Real Meet the Geeks on Facebook. You can find us there. You can also message us through there. blinshriek@hotmail.com is the email address. Of course, all that information is on the website. You can grab it from there, or you can reach me on Twitter if you want to reach me on Twitter at SeanGeek. One word.
There you go.
There. Get a hold of me.
Yeah.
We'd love to do it. Sounds like fun. All right. Well, I'm in my driveway.
Okay.
Looking like some sort of creep prowling my neighborhood. So I better get out of my car and go in the house.
Okay. Well, I got more questions for another time.
Well, do you want to do? Let's. Do you want to do another day this week?
If you want.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll tack it on this one. We'll have a slightly longer episode.
All right. Sounds good.
Awesome. Okay.
All right. Well, you have a good night.
We'll see you. We'll see you in part 2.
All righty.
All right.
All right.
Hey.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Hello.
Say what?
Say what? Say what?
Say what?
Say what?
Did you look outside?
What's that?
Did you look outside?
Did I look outside? No.
Yeah.
What? Why? What happened?
It's snowing now.
Snowing?
Yep.
I heard something about snow today, but I haven't seen any.
Well, it's just
But I haven't,
started on this end of town.
I can't open my window. Gee. Well, you're driving in the snow?
Yeah, I mean, it's not staying, but it's just it's literally just starting, but it looks, the temperature's going to drop. And then it's going to stick.
Oh, lovely. Lovely.
Lovely.
Lovely. 'Tis the season.
It is the season.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
well, continue
we're gonna do
from where we
part 2?
left off. Yeah, let's continue where we left off yesterday. I was having fun with
Okay.
that. You got your list in front of you?
Okay, what's that?
You got your list in front of you?
Yeah, I got my list.
Awesome.
Okay.
I'm ready.
First question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Star Wars versus Star Trek.
Star Wars. Yeah.
Because of the obvious, or it's got more of a following, or?
No, I think I like the action of Star Wars. There is a definite lack of action in Star Trek. Although the new Star Treks are quite good. Like, there's actually a lot more action going on in those ones.
Right. There's more of a studio-based show.
Yeah.
Like Star Wars is kind of a vast world, whereas, you can tell at least the old Star Trek was all in the studio-based type thing.
Well, yeah, it had limited budget and all that stuff, and when it's on TV, you're really limited to what you can do.
Right.
But I do like some of the storylines off the old Star Trek. Kind of how it was a mirror to society, that sort of thing. Almost had a Twilight Zone feel to it. So I do like the intellectual side of it, but I think the popcorn guy inside of me likes Star Wars better.
Right.
But I do like Star Trek quite a bit. Just, it hasn't hit with me as often.
Right.
What about you?
I would say Star Wars. I never was really into... Star Trek was on when we were younger, and that's the only real version of Star Trek that I really watched. I think I may have watched the first movie, but then after that, it just kind of... I never really watched any more of that.
Does Star Trek have more appeal for you because Eddie Murphy made fun of it?
No, Star Wars was better.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I only recently watched the first couple of movies from Star Trek, or the older movies, because I remember,
the old Star Trek movies?
No, Star Wars.
Star Wars, you mean? Okay, you said Star Trek.
Yeah, because I think you had the VHS tapes.
Yep.
And I watched it, and this was the ones before they cleaned up all the stuff, like, things hovering where you could see the wheels underneath and whatnot. So I saw the old version, and then I think I saw the new version where they kind of cleaned it up, and actually they did a really good job of that.
Oh yeah, they definitely did.
Yeah. Okay, here's one. You had sent a link actually to the article, so this will be kind of a question regarding that. Guardians of the Galaxy versus Suicide Squad.
We're going to have a whole episode talking about the news that I dropped on you. That's a whole episode on its own. So we're not going to spoil that episode here. But if I had to pick between the two, Guardians by far. I actually was a huge fan of the Guardians comic book that came out in like the late 80s, early 90s, the original Guardians team.
So that's where it stemmed from?
Oh, God, yeah.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of where it came from.
No, they kind of drastically changed it, but kind of not. In the comics, the old version of it was they were a team in like I don't know if it was the 35th century or something crazy like that. Mm-hmm. And one of the members of the team was actually from the 20th century. He had been put in suspended animation. He'd been put in suspended animation and then came out of suspended animation in whatever, the 35th century or whatever the heck it was.
Yep. Is that like Encino Man?
Yeah, exactly like Encino Man.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was a fan of that. It was just cheesy as hell. The comic was.
Right.
But I mean, I don't know. It had a lot of heart, so it was actually a lot of fun.
Okay,
but yeah, the movie was excellent. I mean, that director, like he's a director writer, like he's amazing. He's really really good. And actually, I'm trying to been meaning to go back and watch some of his other stuff. Yeah, and he's a punk rocker too. So
he's a punk rocker.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if I think I may have seen Guardians of the Galaxy the first one.
Oh,
I think.
Yeah, if you have.
Now, would you recommend seeing the second one or going straight to Suicide Squad? Because I haven't seen any of those ones yet.
Well, Suicide Squad is had a lot of potential, but the studio meddled in the original vision that the director had, and it's not very good. The story doesn't follow any kind of narrative at all.
Okay.
Now, the comic book, I never really followed the comic book for Suicide Squad either.
Okay.
So I have a couple of issues for sure, but I don't know.
Now, have they done any spin-offs from Guardians of the Galaxy?
Not yet.
Because I think Suicide Squad, they got with Birds of Prey, I believe, or something like that.
Well, yeah, so the whole thing with Suicide Squad is, it made a lot of money because the premise, the director, everything out of the gate looked great. But the studio went in and did an edit on the movie and changed everything around because they didn't like what the director had put together. So they kind of ruined it, but there was so much potential in it, and no fault of the actors at all. The actors were all actually quite good. Adam Beach was even in the movie. He's a Canadian guy, a First Nations guy, famous Canadian actor. I think he might actually be from Winnipeg. I'm not sure, but. Yeah, like there was so much potential. Everybody agreed that the characters were great, the portrayals were great. Just the editing of the movie was all messed up. So, yeah, there's spin-offs galore that are coming off of that thing.
Right.
Birds of Prey, there's a Harley Quinn, possibly. There's going to be more Jared Leto as the Joker coming down the pipe. Yeah.
So now, would this be similar to, say, music industry going into the studio and the producers trying to change the music to what they think is going to sell versus what the artist wants to portray? Is that kind of the same idea?
That's a great analogy, actually. Yeah, I would agree with that.
But instead of music, it's video. Just kind of the same idea, but different.
Yeah, you know what?
Format.
Yeah, okay. So we're gonna take a little sidelong story here. You're totally leading.
I think
me here.
I tickled something.
Oh, you tickled something.
Yeah.
There was this great band in Winnipeg that I followed and saw a bunch of times, and I don't know if I should say it or not. Say which band it was.
Well, just say Band X or something.
Okay, well, Band X. We'll call them Band
Okay.
X. Not the actual Band X, because there is a band called Band X.
Oh, well,
But-
Brand X.
Brand
Band
X.
X.
Okay, so Band X. They were a prominent band in the scene. They were opening for a lot of really high-profile music artists. They did a lot of tours. They got a grant from Canada to make their first CD, which they did with a Guess Who guy, one of the guys from the Guess Who.
Okay.
I might have said too much there, but and then they got a grant to make a music video, which was great, which was awesome. Then they went in and got a grant to do a second CD, so they went in to do that CD, and I mean they were riding high at this point, like they're on the verge of like total success because they really hustled, and
Right.
the producer, a Juno-winning producer, they hired him to do their CD, and he came in and said, changed their sound completely. So they went from a guitar-driven band with multiple vocalists, lots of harmonies, really good Pink Floyd-like guitar,
Mm-hmm.
and they were awesome, like complex bass melodies, complex song structure, and like lyrical style. Like there was a lot of stuff going on in the lyrics. They were phenomenal. So when they went in the studio for the second one, I don't know, I think they limited the writing to one of the members of the band. They toned down the guitar, they amped up the keyboards, and when I say keyboards, I mean keyboards, like less piano, more keyboard.
Like very prominent.
Yeah, like it wasn't even a good sounding piano sound, it was a keyboard sound.
Right.
So they made all those changes. They had multiple vocalists in the band. They reduced it down to one vocalist. Actually, the not my kind of style of singing, but probably the most commercially viable in other
Right.
forms of music, but definitely not in their form of music. So they just diluted their sound down to one song from the first CD and made all the songs sound like that one song, which wasn't a bad song, but I don't need to hear the song 13 times
Well,
in a
yeah,
row
they're
on the
going
same
with,
album.
yeah, they're going with the formula that works, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like AC/DC, you can listen to all their songs; they all have the same beat. It's just different tune.
Yeah. But, yeah, it just didn't sound good. And I don't think the album did very well. The first one actually got airplay across Canada. The video was featured on Much Music. I mean, and it had quote-unquote shittier production value because it was done in a lower-end studio.
Do I know this band?
Yeah, you've seen them at least once.
Okay.
It's a guy I used to work with.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's someone getting involved and changing what the band should be and changing it to something else. So, for example, in Suicide Squad, the Joker and Harley Quinn had very prominent roles, I think, in the original edit. And then when the studio came in, they put most of the Joker stuff on the cutting room floor. So that's like taking one of the singers away.
Right.
And then they focused to the majority of the film, like they changed the focus on which characters were key. But by doing that, they had to change the storyline around, but everything had been shot. So they just edited it in a creative way to tell a different story. But it didn't jive. Like there was so many editing errors, like where someone, might have their hair parted one way and then parted the other way, within the same scene sort of thing. Just like lots of little things like that, because, they edited it the best they could based on the story that the studio wanted to tell versus what the director wanted to tell. Moving stuff around. I'm sure they moved stuff from the end to the beginning and stuff in the middle towards the end.
Like, before they release this stuff, whether it's music or the actual movie, do they not sit down with, actual test subjects and say yay or nay?
Yeah, well, it's funny because they released the trailer for the movie, and it got top scores. So I think that's when they started meddling with the film. And they turned it more into a music video than a movie, I think.
So it's like all the commercials for the movies, they just show you the best part of the movie, and then you might as well not even see the movie because there's nothing really left.
Yeah. They really screw the pooch.
Well, regardless, I'm going to probably watch it anyway, just because some people say it was good. So
yeah,
I'll have to give you my 2 cents after I've seen it.
Yeah, actually, I would. Let's do that on the show. I'd be curious to let me know when you're going to do it, and I'll rewatch it at the same time.
Okay. Ready for the next question?
Yep.
Acoustic drums versus electronic drums.
Oh, we did this one before.
We
did a whole episode on this.
Oh, okay.
But
next question.
Yep.
Okay. Now I know you do the tabletop gaming.
Yep.
Okay, and you're one of the game masters.
Yep.
Now, being a game master versus just being the player.
Oh.
Is that a hard one?
Yeah, that's a really hard one. You know what? It really depends. So the same it's kind of the same factors both ways. So if you're playing in a game, it all boils down to the GM. Whoever's running the game can make for the best experience as a player, and the best players can make for having the best experience as a GM. But you can have one player ruin. So if you have one good GM, it almost doesn't matter who you're playing with. He's able to keep those other players in check and make sure that everybody has a good time. Like a really good GM can do that. Conversely, if you're a GM and you're running a game, all it takes is one player to ruin the entire dynamic. So, I've probably done more GMing than not because I like to be in control, I guess. So I would probably say GMing, I guess.
Okay.
But I really love playing. It
kind of depends.
Yeah. I have a certain style I like to play when I play, and there's a million different styles of GMing that you can do. Some that are hard, it's all about the rules. Some other ones, it's all about the storytelling. Sometimes it's a middle road. So yeah, I do love playing though. In fact, we're playing on Saturday, a brand new game.
Is this an actual game that's out there, or is this one that you've modified?
No. I'm not running it. I'm playing in it.
Oh, you're playing it. Okay.
Yep. And there's going to be let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 players. There will be.
Oh, that should be good.
Yeah. Going classic Dungeons and Dragons, first or second edition. I'm not sure which one he's decided on.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Way back.
Way back.
And then there's Traveler. the only one I've ever really played.
Yeah, Traveler's fun, but super complex on the rules.
Right.
D&D First Edition is, tell me what you want to do. It's more like that.
Okay. All right, next question.
Yep.
Okay, so say there's a movie that's come out that's come from a book.
Yep.
And many of them have happened that a lot of times, sometimes the book is better than the movie, sometimes the movie is better than the book. It kind of all depends. Now, for yourself, movie versus book for a particular movie. Now, it doesn't. You can pick any show or book that you want.
Okay. Generally, the book is better, but when it comes to a comic book being converted to a movie, there's a lot of movies that have done it better than the comic. But when it comes to just like a straight book, the movie rarely is not as good as the book.
Right. More detail.
Yeah, there's more detail in the book. A movie is always chopped down, you know. Like, I mean, if you're going to translate a book into a movie, the movie would be 6 hours long or longer, right?
Yeah, true enough.
So that's, you know, a movie is usually an abridged version of a book, for lack of a better word. But in terms of comic books, like there's all the movies that are done like based on oh god, what's the writer's name now? Kick-Ass. He did Kick-Ass. He did oh my god, what's the other one? Kick-Ass, Wanted, Kick-Ass 2, a couple other ones. Oh. Anyway.
You're saying Kick-Ass, not Jackass, right?
No,
Kick-Ass?
not Jackass, Kick-Ass,
okay.
Yeah. That writer, a lot of the stuff he did for Marvel Comics was interpreted into the Marvel movies as well.
Right.
He's a great writer, but I see one of his movies and I go and read the comic, and the comic usually starts out great and ends really poorly. That's how I find with that writer.
Wow.
And it's just because it's not my style, it's not what I'm into.
Oh, okay.
But his books start out a particular way and then blow up in your face, pretty much, and just get all, like, really freaking weird.
Yeah. So your expectations are totally different than what comes on the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, that's what I would say about that. I think a good example, and most people will disagree with me, was there was a movie called The Watchmen.
Yeah.
And it was based on the comic. It was a super long movie, and they included a lot of the stuff from the comic. The comic was only 12 issues long, so they were able to cover actually most of the stuff. But in the movie, it was actually almost frame for frame the same as the comic book. In fact, yeah, it was mostly frame for frame. It was almost like they did a complete retelling, frame for frame of the comic, which is great. But the only thing is they changed the ending in the movie.
Why would you go through all the effort?
I know, it seems weird,
to go
right?
through all, and you know how many diehard fans are, you know, whether it's, you know, especially like Star Wars or something, and if something misquotes something or says, well, no, in actuality, this is what happened, or, you know, it'd be the same thing when they're doing this movie where everything's frame for frame, because anytime you watch any type of movie that's related to a book, it's always different.
Yeah.
I mean, why not make it at least, I mean, even if it's not the same length, like, because if you had the book, I mean, you'd have, you know, watching the movie for 3 weeks. But even if you condensed it down, at least follow the same storyline. Don't, you know, because if the book was that successful and you're wanting to watch the movie of the book, don't change the movie.
Well, the comic is the most successful comic, I think, of all time. Like, it was in the top 20 bestsellers list for, like, 30 years. Or top 50 or top 100 or whatever it was. But it still sells, and every once in a while there's a spike in sales and it makes the top 10 again. But the ending of the movie I actually liked better, because the ending of the book, of the comic, was really convoluted and complex, and the way, and it was a giant vagina basically in the end.
This is a comic?
Yes.
Oh.
Because the guy has, he just, whatever. Alan Moore is the writer. He tends to go into the dirty side of things in his comic books. Like, his comics are always very, very adult.
That's his style?
Yeah, so there was this big monster in the end, and it was a giant vagina, for lack of a better word. Like, that's what a lot of people call it. They actually got rid of that in the film, possibly, maybe because that's exactly what it looks like. But they actually changed it and tied it in a much tighter, more concise fashion than the comic did. And they actually, the villain's motivations, all that stuff is exactly the same, but the villain actually used a more convenient, in the movie, a more convenient way of defeating the problem or the issue. So the issue they have throughout the movie, he found a better way to defeat it than they did in the comic book.
So it made more sense.
Well, yeah, it was more psychological.
Right.
But he played one of the characters and used that character to save the world. The villain did. So the villain actually saved the world.
That's a different twist.
Yeah, I mean, he saved the world in the comic, but he did it in a different kind of way. Like, he introduced something that wasn't, something brand new. In the comic, something brand new was introduced.
Oh.
To end the book. And in the comic, they used what was already there and pre-existing. Right. And it tied, as from a writer's perspective, I thought it was a much cleaner, more definitive ending.
Okay.
Now, most people will disagree with me because they love, the comic book, but that was the only issue I had with the comic book. That was an okay ending, but I don't know. It was fantastic for fantastic's sake instead of just telling the story.
Right.
Because he's telling this good story, and it's all about character. It's all about narrative. It's all about pacing and how it goes. And in the end, he just like, okay, fuck all that, and let's throw a giant monster that looks like a female anatomy. And that's the bad guy.
And that was the bad guy.
It's just so random. It was just so random. But, I mean...
Where'd that come from?
Well, he pushes buttons like that. That's kind of his style. So, I mean, I was okay with it in the comic, but when I saw how the movie did, I'm like, that is actually better. Like, I like it better. I think Corey might agree with me on that, because I think Corey liked the movie, too. The movie was... Like, I thought the movie was great. It didn't do the numbers that they wanted it to do. Because, I mean, that comic is so dark, that can't be a mainstream hit with a comic that dark.
Kind of a cult following more so? Or?
Yeah, I mean, in comics, people buy stuff that aren't necessarily going to translate to movies in terms of sales.
Right.
Like a really good book, like The Grapes of Wrath, probably doesn't make for a blockbuster movie, but everybody's read it, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Watchmen, but you move Watchmen to the big screen, unless you're going to change it and modernize it and change a bunch of things, you're not going to get that big of an audience. You just can't. I mean, you can't make a blockbuster out of something so dark and depressing.
Oh,
like,
no.
It's got to have popcorn to it, and this movie didn't have enough popcorn, and it couldn't from the story it was told from, so. But anyway.
It'd be a certain person and like a certain style, I guess.
Yeah. Nature of the podcast is when I get home, I sign off. I'm home in the driveway. So
you're home?
Yeah. So I better let you go.
Well, all right then.
All right. So thanks for this. It was actually a lot of fun.
Oh,
so
good. I ran out of geeky questions. The rest of them were just random.
So I want to do this again, but I want to do it you, me, Corey in the same room.
Okay.
And then more of a, like, I'll throw something out for both of you, and you both have to defend your argument against the other. Something more along those lines. I think that'd be fun.
So the debate team.
Yep.
Okay. Well, if you want, we could probably come here, whatever. We can grab that microphone. And
yours is the central location, so I think that would work really well.
Grab 3 chairs, and we'll huddle around the microphone. And
maybe we should YouTube it at the same time. Maybe do the whole gamut here. I think that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
All right.
All right, then.
All right. So we'll sign
shall-
off. We'll see you on the flip side.
All righty.
All right.
Talk to you later. All right.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.